everyone, this is Mindy Eggen for Honeybee Stamps, and in today's video, I'm going to be creating a card using the Lovely Layers Sweetheart Roses. So the first thing I did, as I always do with the Lovely Layers set, is I die cut it out of a white cardstock. This helps me get an idea on how to arrange everything. I didn't do the leaves yet. I had just worked on the roses. So I'm now going to take the leaves and I will die cut them as well from white cardstock. Then I'm going to start adding some color to the white cardstock roses. So to do this, I decided to bring out my grip mat from Waffle Flower. So I'm pulling the plastic off and I'm going to place this over the top of my work surface, which is just a black glass mat that I have. What's nice about this is it is going to hold my cardstock in place so it doesn't move around on my work surface. So I'm placing this first piece down. This is my base layer. And I want to add some color to the stems and the flowers to give it just that base layer of color. I'm starting with the color Sprout from Concord & Ninth, and I could not find my bitty blending brushes from Honeybee Stamps, so I am using these pint size paper pouncers from Picket Fence Studios. I'm just going to pounce by picking up the ink and then pounce it over the area on my die cut. This was actually a really nice way to add color to the die cut because I wasn't worried about bending my paper or getting it caught with a blending brush. So being able to pounce that color was actually a really nice way to do that. Now I am bringing in, I believe this is Pink Lemonade from Concord & Ninth. Again, this is just a base layer of color, kind of to hide that stark white. So I removed that main piece off of my grip mat here and I'm bringing in the leaves. Now, one thing I didn't notice till later on is that I accidentally brought in, I thought they were leaves, but they were actually petals to one of the buds, which is those last two pieces that I added there. So unfortunately, my buds turned green. I'll show you what I did in the end. But I'm going to add another base layer of color to this. Again, using Sprout, so it is a very nice light green, just pouncing on that color. Now, if I want to add a little bit of dimension to this, I can bring in a darker color. I believe that this is Avocado Ink from Concord & Ninth. Now, of course, my paper pouncer is kind of consuming my leaves a little bit, and I do have my leaves kind of close together on here. So some areas I was able to get kind of a two-tone look. Other layers, I just covered it completely in that darker shade. I am using a pick and place tool to help pick up those pieces and remove them from my grip mat. And then I'm using the other end of that tool, the wax piece, to place my roses onto my grip mat. I am cleaning the grip mat in between, which I just use some water and a towel and wipe up any excess ink because I don't want to pick up any of that green ink from the leaves because with green and pink, I'm going to end up with brown. Wasn't really ready to make brown flowers. Now I did switch paper pouncers, so this is the pink handled one. And I am applying a base layer of color to this. This is Pink Lemonade. And then I'm going to come in with Watermelon to add just some darker petals to that. I removed that rose off on the side. I'm bringing in one of the smaller sets. This one only has 3 layers to it. When I bring in my flowers from when I had them laid out previously, I do try to keep them in order, bringing them onto that grip mat and also taking them off. So that way it is still pretty easy for me to layer them back up. Now I can start the assembly process. I'm just using my Honeybee Stamps liquid glue and my tweezers to help pick up the flowers, hold on to them while I apply that glue. Since they do get pretty small in the pieces or the size of the piece, the tweezers just help keep my fingers out of the way so I can find where it lines up exactly. So I'm finishing up this smaller piece, which only has about 3 pieces to it, and then I can move on to one of the roses. I won't show the entire piecing process because it's just a matter of layering them together, but I did speed it up. So you can see me layering it up, but I did want to speed it up because it gets pretty monotonous. I'm just finding the pieces that line up like a puzzle, and that's how I am attaching it. Or you can use the reference guide that Honeybee Stamps provides. After I have my rose assembled, I will then add some of the leaves on. I wasn't honestly 100% sure where all the leaves went, so I tried to match them up as best as I can. Honestly, as long as it pretty much fits, I don't think it matters. your recipient is not going to know if you layered them correctly. So be kind to yourself when you are putting together your layering sets. Then I have the pot or the vase that my flowers are going to go in. I could just use the flowers on their own, but I really did like this and the design. Again, I die cut it out of white cardstock. I also die cut out those additional elements from white cardstock, but thought I might dress it up a little bit. So this is some, I believe, champagne glitter cardstock from Spellbinders. I trimmed out a small piece, and when I first laid it down, I thought it was just a little bit too sparkly. I didn't think I would ever say that, but I did think it was a little too sparkly. But when I took the white die cuts and layered it over the top of that glitter cardstock and offset it just a little bit, it's giving it just a hint of that glitter. So that is what I decided to do, was I placed the glitter cardstock pieces down first. I brought the white die cuts in and just slightly offset it. And then I'm going to set a heavy black over the top and let that sit so it adheres down to that glitter cardstock really well. To create my background for my flowers, I decided to bring out my gel plate. So I am taking the same inks that I had used, except for one. I did bring in one additional color. I started with applying the pink lemonade at the top, watermelon in the middle, and then wheat towards the bottom. Now, if you are applying ink using an ink pad, a foam ink pad, you want to have a good grip on your ink pad because that foam really wants to stick to the gel plate. I couldn't think of the word. So I brayered over that with a large brayer to help kind of blend those colors together. And then I rubbed that off or brayered that off onto a scratch piece of cardstock that is over on the right-hand side. I placed another piece of cardstock over the top to pick up that ink off of the gel plate. And I'm going to do it one more time. So what's kind of funny about this is I am not using the background that I'm picking up off of the gel plate. I actually want to use that piece of paper that I'm brayering my color off on. I really love that look and how the colors kind of overlap with the brayer. The piece that's on the right-hand side, that is really what I plan on using for my card project, but I am going to save that other one for future projects. So now I'm going to take this absolutely gorgeous background stamp. This is the Vintage Flora. I totally love this. And I am going to be using it in my Misti stamping tool. So because it is a red rubber stamp, I need to remove the foam insert from my Misti. I placed my cardstock panel in there, and then I'm inking up my stamp, but I'm using all three colors. So I went through the pink lemonade, the watermelon, and the brown. I used my brayer over the top of the stamp, which is kind of just a fun technique to do. Kind of changes things up a little bit versus just having those harsh lines of where you had inked up the background stamp. And then I'm going to stamp that down. So that is pretty subtle. I'm okay with that, but I really wanted it to stand out just a little bit more. So I'm going to ink up that stamp again. I kind of changed up where I placed my colors. Again, I'm going to take my rubber brayer over that. It's going to help smooth out those lines a little bit. You just want to make sure you're not brayering straight up and down or in the same spot. You want to kind of slightly shift your brayer to help blend those colors. Stamp that down. Love how that came out. I'm okay if it even has some scattered spots where it didn't stamp perfectly because I'm going for an imperfection type of background today. So that came out totally gorgeous. So off screen, I did some die cutting. I die cut out that large postage out of white cardstock. And then that way I'm going to die cut my panel that I just did using the rectangle die. And I found a rectangle that fits just inside of the postage lines. So I did that. I also die cut out another one of those planters so I could back that for some stability. And I also die cut out another base layer for my flowers, again for stability, because the pieces in the back, my stems are kind of flimsy with the 80-pound cardstock I used. So I backed that with the cardstock using the liquid glue, added my planter, or maybe it's called an urn, over the top, and then I trimmed off any excess that was hanging out. Now I can work on my sentiment, and I love this sentiment. This is Handmade Happiness, which I think is such a great sentiment to send to someone. I'm stamping it on white cardstock. This sentiment comes from the Mailbox Memos, And I do have another waffle flower grip mat in my Mini Misti to hold the cardstock in place while I stamp. So I used the coordinating die to die cut out the sentiment. I also die cut out a couple more pieces so I could layer them up together for dimension and stability as well. Before I add anything down or secure it to the card front, I am definitely going to be adding splatters. So yes, I do already have my planter and my roses put together, which I'm totally okay if I get splatters on my planter. But I added some white acrylic paint for some splatters over the flowers. I also did it for my stamped background. And then I kind of just started to have fun. I was going through my stash on what else I could splatter this with. Here is some white iridescent shimmer spray from Hero Art. This I only added to the background. I did also do some gold as well for some fun. So you'll see some gold splatters here. I also took my watermelon ink pad and smooshed it down onto my work surface. I added a couple drops of water, and I'm going to use the same paintbrush that I had that white ink on. So that's why you see it kind of turning that different shade. But I'm also going to add splatters of that. So it's just a subtle splatter of that color. Now I can start working on my assembly. So for my panel that I had die cut, I did trim out another piece of cardstock to be just a little bit smaller than this and layered them together with a tape runner just to, again, add the stability. I use that word a lot because I do like adding extra pieces of cardstock. Now I did also take some thin foam tape and add it to the back of the panel. So it's going to pop that up just a little bit from that postage die. I have my flowers here that I will take some thin white foam squares to, added them behind the flowers. I'm going to take off the backing, and I decided my flowers were going to go over on the left-hand side, would also look really great centered too. I have that one extra rose that kind of just goes right in the center there, so that when I'm going to tilt, I did also add some thin white foam squares to that one as well. And then my sentiment. I have some thin foam squares trimmed out, so they're going to go on the right-hand side of the sentiment, and then liquid glue to the other side that's going to overlap my planter. And then that's going to finish off my card project. I absolutely love how this came out, how the roses tie into the background, that kind of mixed media background feel. Really enjoyed making this card and how it came out. I hope this card has inspired you to create. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and see you soon.